This is the 415ers podcast brought to you by the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network. Coming at you twice a week here in the off season. That's Marc Grandi. I'm Evan Giddings. Please check us out on the Odyssey app. Download, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. 5 stars are appreciated. Well, this kind of leads us into the next portion of the week, Marc, which is OTAs. And the first place we do have to start with, I believe, is at the quarterback position, because what are you looking for in OTAs? I'm looking for Trey Lance. I'm looking for Sam Darnold as well. And those are going to be the two guys that are getting, whether it be first team reps, quarterback reps in general. Those are who all eyes are going to be on. And I'm sure reports will continue to leak out throughout this week. Kyle Shanahan will speak on Tuesday afternoon. We're recording this on Monday, so apologies for that. But to me, Trey Lance had better, number one, be given the opportunity to compete for whether it's the backup job, the QB1 job, should Brock Purdy not be able to go. And he had better look like Jeff Christensen has promised, essentially, that they have made substantial reworkings to his mechanics, because this was a guy that last year in preseason was completing just about as much of his passes as he did in his 4 games as a pro, about 55%. And the one reason why I am skeptical of that leap being taken, Marc, is because it simply just doesn't happen with a lot of quarterbacks, even established ones. The greatest example is Josh Allen, who increased his completion percentage from, I believe it was his 3rd to his 4th year, by 11%. That's an astronomical number. But outside of that, I think the biggest example of an established quarterback since 2011, because prior to that, the passing rules or the defensive rules made it very difficult on passers. I think that's the reason why we only saw 2 5,000-yard passers prior to 2011. There's been an abundance since then. I think Aaron Rodgers increased his completion percentage from 2019 to 2020, so the first of his back-to-back MVP seasons, by about 8% at age 35. That's the best example of an established guy making a leap that I can see outside of Josh Allen. And I'm not saying that Trey Lance needs to make that kind of leap, but he needs to be at least a 60% mark. And it needs to be somewhere, Marc, that we're also checking out how are you able to hit just 10 yards and in. That was the area that he really struggled last year in preseason, as well as he has in the regular season. And so if Jeff Christensen's work is done, and in fact, he did the 49ers job for them, then Trey Lance needs to be at least completing 60% of his passes in practice. I'm not sure if those numbers will be for public consumption, but I'd better hear that kind of trend for Trey Lance this season in OTAs.
Well, maybe you will hear that, but I'm not even certain it's going to be a gigantic chunk of plays, because I'm not even certain that Trey Lance is going to be getting the lion's share of the snaps in OTAs at quarterback. Brock Purdy is obviously off the table right now, so the question is, all right, who gets most of the first team reps, Trey Lance or Sam Darnold? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has made it seem like it's a dead heat thus far. Everything that he said about Sam Darnold, obviously he's been complimentary of Trey Lance as well, but it seems like he's been a little more open with the praise for Sam Darnold. I mean, what did he say just earlier in the month? He said, what about, Sam Darnold's talent? He still sees him, as a top pick in the draft. He has, a great arm, which is the reason he's in the NFL. So, I mean, first of all, before even diving into things I want to see Trey Lance accomplish, Evan, I want to see him get most of the first team reps, but I am not confident that it's going to happen at all, because I can just see the headlines already, and I can see all the tweets rolling in from down in Santa Clara. Tomorrow, Tuesday, you're listening to this on Tuesday, probably today, later on in the day. Oh, Sam Darnold opens as the 49ers, first string quarterback at OTAs. He's with the first team for the first drive or for the first set of drills or whatever the case is. I can already see that happening. And maybe I'll be wrong, but I just get the sense that is the way this is going to roll. And I really hate saying that, because I want to see Trey Lance get a legitimate chance. I'm just not so sure we're even going to get a chance to see it in OTAs.
Well, we better. I mean,
Yes.
Mark, and it's not just about what's fair or, who's being given the opportunity. If there is a time to give Trey Lance quote unquote first team reps, wouldn't it be now? Wouldn't
Yes.
it be in the month of May, the beginning of OTAs, then moving into mandatory minicamp, then the preseason? If I'm to find out, both as a fan as well as a member of the 49ers, if this kid can throw and he has made the strides that Jeff Christensen is promoting, then wouldn't now be the time to figure that out? You have about
100%.
you have a couple of weeks to do so, and in my mind, if you also are bringing in Sam Darnold, part of me, to be the third quarterback and to be the quote unquote veteran, the guy who's had the most experience of the group, well, then he should need the least amount of grooming. Now, if you want to tell me that he needs time to get the playbook right and he needs time to familiarize himself with the offense, I'll hear you. But I personally would rather devote this kind of experimental time. I'm sure a coach would tell me, hey, every rep counts, but this more experimental time to the guy who is supposed to be your franchise. And now you need to figure out if he is going to be or not immediately. Now would be the time for me, Mark, where it's unequivocally Trey Lance is taking those first team reps and Sam Darnold is going to have to wait until minicamp. I don't think that's too much to ask.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I'm trying to think of what and maybe we're all just reading into this a little bit too much. I mean, it's optional team activities. It's obviously it means a lot specifically for the younger guys. Trey Lance obviously fits in that group for the non-established starters. This is where you can really earn the right to have a bigger role in training camp. And then what do you do in training camp determines the chance you get in preseason. And what you do in preseason determines if you make the roster and if you're going to be a surprise starter or whatever the case is. So it all starts in moments like this. So it is important, but perhaps we would be reading into it a little bit too much to say, well, even if it's just a 50-50 split right now, that means Kyle Shanahan is already sold on Sam Darnold's ability to be the team's number 2 quarterback. Because you kind of get the sense a guy who's just joining the roster over your hand-selected third overall quarterback from just a couple of years ago. If a guy who just got added to this team is already splitting reps 50-50 with your, hand-picked quarterback, it almost feels like a win for the new guy, a win for Sam Darnold. So if it's anything like that, or even close to 50-50, it just feels like the writing on the wall is, well, Sam Darnold is, picking up steam and gaining momentum, and it's looking like he might beat out Trey Lance. Maybe you and I, maybe fans, maybe we're all reading into these kinds of numbers this early in the offseason, Evan, but I'm just thinking about the message that it sends. If you, and by you I mean Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, if you open OTAs with Sam Darnold getting the first team reps early on, there is going to be just a thunderstorm of upset 49er fans down in Santa Clara watching some open practices on Twitter. It is going to be a mess. And I'm not, saying that the reason the 49ers should give Trey Lance the reps is to avoid pressure from the fan base. Of course not. You do it from a football perspective. But it just seems like such a a hot button issue and a hot button topic that could be solved in such a simple way by just seeing what you got with this guy. But for whatever reason, I just don't feel confident that that's what we're going to see in OTAs.
Well, look, fans might feel like there's hell to pay, and I'm sure Kyle Shanahan would tell them to go to hell.
Oh,
I mean,
exactly.
that's just, he simply doesn't care. And especially when it comes to his quarterback position. I mean, maybe that's the reason why they've been in the Final Four, haven't been to the mountaintop. And maybe he'd also tell you that's why he is in the Final Four each and every year.
Maybe.
So we'll see. Any other things from OTAs that kind of catch your eye, Mark? I know that there's not a whole lot of, I guess, positions that are necessarily up for grabs. You could, I guess, potentially Jake Moody, Zane Gonzalez, a lot of backup positions. Obviously, the backup tight end spot, potentially the third running back spot. They're going to try and, I'm sure, integrate their rookies. But is there anything else that kind of stands out to you about the OTAs that you'll be keeping an eye on?
I'm interested in some of the first looks for some of the defensive linemen. I mentioned earlier that Nick Bosa likely will not be there. He generally doesn't attend OTAs. He's probably still working down with his brother, Joey Bosa, at their home in South Florida, which is what they normally do at this stage of the offseason. Um, but I'm looking at second year guy Drake Jackson. How does he look after a full off season? I know he didn't have the best end to his rookie year. And then, behind those guys, how do Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant, new 49ers, look? They're likely going to be reserve guys this season. But in your first look in a 49er jersey, how do those guys look? So I'll be looking at that spot. I'm not sure how much we're going to really see, in terms of the right tackle position with Colton McKivitz. But I think I might be looking at some of those reserve defensive linemen who, without Bosa at OTAs, are going to be thrust into. I mean, it's not important in terms of, winning and losing games, of course, because it's OTAs, but thrust into more, I don't know, more of a spotlight in OTAs because you are without Nick Bosa at this stage. I think there's an opportunity for maybe someone to catch our eye, to blossom, and then potentially maybe become like the darling of the 49ers offseason. I think there is potential for something like that, specifically on the defensive line.